Ready for the weekend? All right. Before I get started, I like to talk about what I want you to remember. A lot of talks, you hear them, and when you come away from that, what in earth did that speaker talk about? I can't remember. So a couple things I want you to remember. Number one, cold calling is not dead. You can set more appointments with prospects that don't have a need. And my name is David Walter, and I'm the superhero of cold calling. So with that out of the way, we're going to talk about this morning your favorite subject in the world. Cold calling. Picking up the phone and making that cold call. Everybody ready? Are you excited? All right, not so much, right? The truth is, we probably all heard the mantra that cold calling's dead, right? LinkedIn, Facebook, we've been hearing that for years. But what I'd like to do is, I'll start by telling you my story, my cold calling story, and hopefully we can change some hearts and minds so that we can start believing that cold calling is an effective tool, right? And so my story started about 20 years ago. I was working for my father's air conditioning company, and it tanked. I won't go into all the details, but he lost the family home. The business went down. I was working for my father at the time, and we had just made millions of dollars, and then just all came crashing down. I had to act fast. I quickly got a job telemarketing. I found something telemarketing. I had a background in that before I started working with my father. And so that's how I survived. At one point, my family had to come and move into my apartment. That's how bad it got. So I was faced with that challenge. Now I started this job. And when I was working there, I found I was a good fit for the job. Everybody there set about 2 appointments a day. And with my background, I could top that and do 5 appointments a day. Unfortunately, the money that I was making was still not good enough to pay all my bills. And I was in jeopardy of losing my BMW that I'd worked hard to get, my apartment. So I was still facing challenges. And so what I did what a lot of people do is you turn to your friend, right? Hey, what should I do? And my friend said, ride the clock. Anybody heard of that before? If you're working for a company, that means come in early, clock in, stay through lunch, stay late. So I tried that, and it wasn't for me. I couldn't do it. Right? I'm big on productivity. I like to see that I'm doing something. I just sit there riding the clock, so I couldn't do that. So then I went back to my friends again and said, okay, what should I do now? I said, well, you only have one option. You've got to get a second job. And so I did that. I got a second job. Can anybody guess what I was doing on the second job? Telemarketing. We're talking about almost 14 hours a day telemarketing to try to make my ends meet. And what was worse is I started falling asleep on the job, right? That was that tiresome, mentally fatiguing, that I'd be falling down and it was automated calls that would come to me, wake me back up again. And so what I like to say is that if this is probably one of Dante's rings of hell, is telemarketing for 14 hours a day. If you can imagine that, right? And so I realized, okay, my friends are not giving me good advice. I need to come up with a better plan. And if anybody, I don't know if anybody ever has been here where you've kind of lost it all or faced these type of dramatic consequences. But I realized I kind of took stock and said, okay, wait a minute. I have a job that pays me a salary plus a commission for every appointment. So really all I need to do is find a way to set a lot more appointments, right? And so it was around that time I had been reading Think and Grow Rich, and a lot of Anthony Robbins. A lot of these books talk about the subconscious mind. I'd like to talk with the guy that does the subconscious mind after the talk. Really interested in that subject, and started claiming my goals. And 6 months later, I had set this goal of setting 15 appointments a day, right? And to put that in perspective, 15 appointments a day, the average IT company sees about 30 prospects a year. The average telemarketer in the nation sets about 3 appointments every 2 days. So 6 months later, after meditating on my goal, I set 15 appointments that day. The next day I came in, I set 15 appointments again. And again, and I did it for 6 months. And then after that, I started my own telemarketing company. But in the process, I made enough money to pay off my car. I paid off land, built my house for cash. I transformed my financial situation by putting these processes in place. So, How did I do that? How was I able to transform and go from an environment where people were setting 2 appointments a day and thought that was their limit, that was their box, right? And break out of that and just transform that into 15 appointments a day? Well, my dominant belief, my core belief, is that anything is possible. If you remember when you were a child, weren't we told that as children in books and our parents affirm us? Yeah. Johnny, you can do anything. Yeah. You can become president. So I believe anything's possible. So if that's true, and I believe that anything's possible, if that's true, why are people setting, telemarketing, and why isn't it easy? Why are people setting way more appointments? What's the cause? What's holding us back from doing that, right? And what I found is that there's a dominant belief out there that is this cause holding us back. And it's the belief that a prospect has to have a need. How many people believe that? A good prospect, a good lead, if I'm gonna call, they've got to have a quantifiable need, right? IT people would call me and say they have to have need and pain before I go call them. Well, this is holding us back because you can set an unlimited number of appointments. Because when you're calling in the marketplace, there's only a few people that will tell you they have a need, right? Have you ever made any cold calls?
Yes, sir.
When I would do it, 90% of the people would say, I'm happy, I'm calling on IT, calling insurance, PEO services, different things I've called on. Call and get the CFO, talk to 20 or 30 people a day. I'm happy with what I have. I'm happy with what I have. I'm happy with what I have. These people don't have needs. They won't tell us they have a need, right? So how is anything possible? You're looking for a need, something's got to change. So what can we do? Now, what I believe is that you can talk to somebody who doesn't have a need and create a need, right? Just create a need. Well, how's that going to happen? If I'm calling people and they all tell me they're not interested or they're happy, how am I going to create a need, right? What am I going to do? Wave a magic wand? Poof. Everybody in my lead base is now they all have a need. Now I can call and get all those appointments, right? That might sound crazy, but I believe that's exactly what you have to do. And what I'll do is I'll go back to something that happened to me early in my career when I had a job in a retail store. Now, if you've ever gone into a store for retail, what happens? Salesman approaches you, and you say what?
Just looking.
I'm just looking, right? Now, what I realized after working there for a period of time is that everybody told me they were just looking. But really, some people actually came in with a need, right? And so what I realized I had to do is really separate the sheep from the goats, right? Who had a need and who didn't have a need. Now, who do you think, anybody can guess, who was my better prospect? The person that I discovered had a need, or the ones I discovered didn't have a need?
The ones didn't.
Didn't have a need?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. You're right. Here's what would happen. I worked in a retail store that sold men's clothing, and we always had a suit sale and a sport coat sale. So as soon as somebody told me, I'm just looking, I'd be like, great, let's go back and let's look at these sport coats. Before they had a chance to say anything, they'd have a sport coat on, and they'd be looking in the mirror, and what would happen is the person that didn't have a need, or that actually did have a need, would start to get nervous. They would think that they're about to buy a sport coat they don't want. And so when they got nervous, I realized, okay, that guy's in here for a need. And usually they would tell me, I just want socks. I just need a belt. I just came in for a pair of slacks. And so that's what I would do is I would get them the socks, the slacks, and get them out of the store. Because the reality was, the prospect that did not have a need, they would leave the store with 2 sport coats, a suit, pants, shirt, tie, because I made all my money on prospects that didn't have a need. So, you're absorbing this, right? You're thinking, okay, I'm going to sell to people that don't have a need. What does that mean? I'm going to sell to people who are not interested? Right? Anybody thinking that? Why would I want to waste my time talking to someone who's not interested? Well, I'm not really talking about that. What I like you to do, if you want to write this down on a piece of paper, I'm gonna create a graph, okay? And I want you to think about it this way. On the far left side, I want you to write happy and loyal. There's two factors, happy and loyal. And then make a space for two other sections, and on the far left, write not happy, not loyal. There's going to be 4 sections. Now on the far right, happy and loyal, these represent prospects who are fundamentally not going to change. This would be like an Apple buyer that waits in line to buy Apple and you try to sell them Samsung. It's not going to happen, right? On the far right, you have people who are not happy and not loyal. These are the people who have a need, right? You can find them through internet marketing, referrals. The problem is they're few and far between. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, few and far between. So what do we have in the middle? If you're writing this down, on the left, there's a left and right. On the left side, put happy and then not loyal, and reverse it on the other side. Not loyal and happy. Does everybody get that?
I think it was going to be tested.
There's only 2 terms. Happy and loyal, not happy, not loyal. And in the middle you have happy and not loyal and happy. Okay? So they're flipped. Okay? So how could somebody be happy and not loyal? And how could they be loyal and not happy? Right?
Likely that they could be happy with what they have, but they're not necessarily tied to it just because they're just happy.
Exactly. All right. In other words, the company hasn't built a relationship with that, right? That's what you're talking about. No relationship. How could somebody be loyal and not happy? This guy might know.
Bad service over the years. I mean, they've been with you for years, but service isn't really.
They're afraid to change.
There you go.
Right? They're not happy with services, but they're afraid to change. Guess what, folks? This is the market. This is the untapped market. For people who are just focusing on finding prospects that have a need, they're not uncovering the true potential in the marketplace, which could be 30 to 40% of any market. People who are loyal but not happy, or happy and not loyal. Now, I'll get into some of my secrets. Right? How did I set all those appointments? Right? It wasn't just the fact that I started targeting people who were happy. There were some specific things that I did. The most important thing, if you're going to recognize this market of people who are happy, not loyal, loyal, not happy, is they are not going to respond to your typical offer. You sell insurance, they already have insurance. You're calling to offer an insurance package and you've got policy A, B, and C. I've got policy A, B, and C. You're calling for IT and you're offering a backup, you're offering managed services. Well, guess what? I've already got managed service, I already got backup. What you have to do is build a better mousetrap. What you were talking about today, this program where you can photo all the belongings of somebody, upload those to the cloud, right? This is an example of an enhancement. How many people have insurance and have photographed everything you have and always keep that current? So if you have a fire, you can actually reclaim all your belongings. There's a need in the marketplace, right? Imagine calling insurance and leading off with that. That's what I call a message leader. So to target prospects that are happy with what they have, but they're not fanatically happy, they don't have a need, you have to lead off with a message leader, something different that creates curiosity, right? Wow. In my book, I call it, have you heard of? Have you heard of this? And the answer should be, no, I have not. If you can make a call and they say that, they've just given you permission to pitch them, right? So I can't stress that enough.
How do you think those up?
Well, we can talk about them when we have questions, but that is the fundamental key, and that's the painful part, right? Nobody wants to change, but that's what you have to do. You have to change. Now, sometimes there's small changes you can make. You can change the name of it. You know, there's different ways you can go about it to be different, but you have to do that. Have to create a message leader. So the second way that I transformed everything was by tapping into my subconscious mind. Because you can't do anything in this world and excel and beat everyone and just bust through the roof unless you tap into what I call your super alter ego. Everyone here has a super alter ego. Oftentimes you've experienced at some point in your life when you had a fight or flight experience. You've done something amazing and you've forgotten about it. But the way that I set all those appointments was by meditating and visualizing what I wanted. And by doing that, I unleashed my alter superhero. Only then, when you have those powers, and think about it, most drugs simply cause your body to release the dopamine, the endorphins, or the adrenaline that you already have. I have ADD, and I can tell you that when I was setting these 15 appointments a day, I was on an adrenaline high.
You were.
My subconscious mind not only gave me the secrets to set all these appointments, it gave me the power to do the focus to do it. And that's what I believe in. If you want to excel in your company, not only you, but all of your teammates all need to be at that Zen level, right? So that's number one. So one of the things I like to talk about, this is like the hot topic when you start talking about telemarketing. Anybody guess what I'm going to talk about? The big obstacle everybody's afraid of?
You hear no.
What?
When you hear no.
No? Anybody else? That's true.
They hang up on you?
Yeah? The gatekeeper. Anybody heard the, oh, there's this gatekeeper. I'm going to call in. I'm never going to get through. They're never going to let me. They're Bengalis. They hover over the CEO. He never sees anything, takes any calls. It all goes to the gatekeeper. And if you can't convince her, you're never going to get appointments. But I can tell you today that there is no international order of gatekeepers meeting secretly to block your calls. It's not true. There are some gatekeepers out there, but they're few and far between. Most of the time, an inexperienced salesperson calling, they say things that alert the person that they're calling that they're making a sales call. They're stopping themselves. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you learn some of the secrets that I talk about, which is mirroring the phone calls that exist within a business, right? There's all these phone calls happening already, right? When a prospect that's dealing with a company calls into that company, well, how do they sound? What do they say, right? When a vendor calls in, what do they say? Do they call in, this is John, and I'm calling from so-and-so corporation, and I'd like to speak with Mr. So-and-so, the CEO of the company. No, hey, this is Dave, and can you get Bob on the phone? Right? You change the pattern of your calls. You don't alert the person that you're calling that you are a salesperson, and you can dramatically increase your calls. The other thing that I like to talk about, it's the gatekeeper, right? I don't want to call because there's a gatekeeper. The other thing is I don't want to call. The other reason I don't want to call is because it's a numbers game. Right? Anybody heard that before?
Yep.
Cold calling is a numbers game. Cold calling is not a numbers game. I actually talk about an example in my book where I almost got fired from a company for making too few calls when I was at the number one rep at the time. Think about that. They asked me how that could be, and I said, it's because I spend more time talking with prospects and less time calling, right? So the truth is you can actually, in my system, I create a way through division of labor, through qualifying, where you can dramatically lower the amount of time that an owner or a salesperson would spend on the phone and dramatically increase the number of appointments they set. You spend less time calling, and you want more time meeting with prospects, right? And selling. Okay, so one of the big questions is, who's curious about the $1 million rebuttal? What is the $1 million rebuttal? The $1 million rebuttal was a system that I created from the beginning that started with finding something innovative to pitch, that unique message leader, right, that aroused curiosity. And what that did is invariably through that call, I could count on one thing. I could count on them asking me for information. When I set all those 15 appointments, every single person I talked to asked me for information. Anybody doing sales? Is that usually a good thing? when they ask for information? Well, my experience has been different. I've always been like, damn it. They asked for information. I'm not going to make the appointment, right? It's too hard. So what the ultimate $1 million rebuttal is, it's once I put them in that position where I've aroused curiosity, they've asked for information, I can use what I call the Jedi mind trick and use very powerful concepts like leading the witness, complimenting, and bundle all these things together and actually cause that person to switch from saying, I just want information, to, you know what, send a rep out. And I use that $1 million rebuttal. Actually, in the process, for about 2 weeks, I went from getting people all the way through these calls and just beating my head against send information for 2 weeks and not setting an appointment. Until I realized I had created something that I wanted. I knew exactly how my enemy was going to open. Just imagine playing chess and knowing your opponent would always open a certain way. That's when I realized if I could come up with the ultimate send information rebuttal, that I could start closing all these appointments. And I went from talking to 30 to 40 people a day and not setting for 2 weeks to closing 15 a day every day. So the send information rebuttal is critically important. But the whole process is, the idea of changing your model and doing something different. Now, depending on my time, the one thing I want to talk about now is.
Already.
Say it again?
You're over already.
I'm already? Okay, we can talk about this later. So, the last thing I want you to remember is cold calling's not dead. You can set more appointments with prospects that don't have a need. And my name is David Walter, and I'm the superhero of cold calling.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I didn't realize you were so close on time until Linda gave me.
I just said, yeah, I didn't know they only get 10 minutes there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but he's the only one, so
Yeah.
that's why I thought he had.
I thought he had 20 also.
What?
I thought he had 20 also.
That's what I thought, that
Well,
he had
take
20.
questions then.
All right, so take some questions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is anybody, before you ask questions, is anybody wondering, how could my business use telemarketing? Right? What company, what do you do?